Welcome to the third of 5 video lectures on Shakespeare's tragedy, Hamlet. All right, so we left off at the end of Act 2, where we had found out that Polonius and the king, Claudius, were planning to spy on Hamlet. They're going to use Ophelia to that end. And we also, in a counter move, know that Hamlet and Horatio have arranged for the players, the actors, to do a play before the king in which they're hoping his response will reveal his guilt. I said at the beginning of the first video lecture that we were coming at the play as a ghost story, and we still are. In the second act, in the second video lecture, I said it kind of turns into a spy novel. And here in Act 3, we see the two elements combined. The ghost is going to return toward the end of Act 3. We'll see that, but we're also going to see the fruition of these various chess moves that Polonius and the king and Hamlet, with Horatio's help, are making against one another. And I don't think it's too much of a surprise. I've said this earlier. Hamlet always wins these. All right, so let's jump in. I am going to take one quick tangent before we start into Act 3 too deeply. And I just want to point out a word that sometimes appears in Shakespeare. So I want to point out this word, and I want to offer just an explanation of what the word means and some strategies for when you come across this word in your reading, right? Especially if you're reading out loud. So this word never gets said on stage anymore. It is not the N word that we know in 21st century United States that we simply don't say anymore. That has no place in a classroom or on a stage. It's not that word, but it just sounds too much like it. So we don't say that word, we skip it. I'm not really a fan of the Shakespeare for Dummies kinds of books. I don't generally say we translate Shakespeare, but this is one case where I say we do. So this word simply in Shakespeare's time meant stingy. We replace it with stingy. And it still keeps, in cases where we need meter, it still has the right syllable count. It works well enough. Just say stingy. The N word that we do not say did not exist in the English language in Shakespeare's time. This word just simply means stingy. So in this case, Rosencrantz is saying that Hamlet was stingy of question. So real quick tangent to get us started. When you see and this isn't going to come up actually in the rest of the video lecture, but it's just worth pointing out, when you see this word, what do you do with it? It is the one time you just translate it out loud and you don't say the actual word. Because on stage or when reading aloud, we don't want to go to all this explanation. Just say stingy, and that works. So, okay, all right, moving on. So we open this scene back up to the top, getting back on track, Act 3. So remember, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern had been spying on Hamlet. They report back to the king. We're going to jump all the way down, though, to the spying bit, the bit that was set up in Act 2. So remember, between Act 1 and 2, a couple months pass. That's not the case between Act 2 and Act 3. It falls immediately afterward. So they've got this plan. The king, Claudius, and Polonius have this plan, and they send Gertrude away. So it's important to keep track of where Gertrude's at. This Act 3, in many ways, is the scene where Gertrude really gets a voice, and where Ophelia gets a voice, too. At least more than we've seen so far, and more than we're going to get in later parts of the play. So pay attention to where they're at. The king sends her away. Claudius sends her away. Sweet Gertrude, leave us too. And whenever I'm reading, remember, follow along with me. It's a good learning step to make sure that you're reading along too, not just listening, but see and hear. Sweet Gertrude, leave us too. Because Rosencrantz and Guildenstern had just left, so leave us also. For we have closely sent for Hamlet hither, that he, as 'twere by accident, may here affront Ophelia. And that they're going to hide. So Gertrude exits at this point. The king and Polonius hide behind some sort of an arras, so they're not seen. And then Ophelia is going to come on, and they're going to overhear the conversation. They're going to listen in, they're going to eavesdrop, they're going to spy on Hamlet using Ophelia. And it's important to know Ophelia knows what's going on here. She's their plant, and she's depending on how we stage this, she's agreed to it, certainly. To what level? Is she reluctantly agreeing? probably. Anyway, let's move on. So the very first lines of Hamlet, when he does come on stage, and remember, he's being spied upon, is the very famous "to be or not to be" speech. Probably the most famous speech in perhaps all of at least Western theater, right? Maybe all of Western literature. Hamlet's "to be or not to be" speech. So we're going to go through this, but keep the context in your mind. A lot of directors will play with this and put it at a slightly different point in the play. But if we follow the text strictly the way that it's brought down to us, the way that we have it here, we've got Polonius and Claudius listening to the "to be or not to be" speech. So one of the questions is, at some point Hamlet knows he's being spied upon. But at what point? And does he know as soon as he walks on stage? That's a question a director has to answer for a production. Or is he saying these lines just to us? Does he know he's being overheard? We're going to get to a point later in the scene where he knows that he's being spied upon. But does he hear? All right, anyway, let's look at the speech just on its own first, and then we'll come back to that question. When does he realize he's being spied upon? Follow along with me while I read. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep. No more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. Right? We saw in Hamlet's first soliloquy, back in Act 1, this idea of what a burden life is. And here we hear it again. Even at that point, he didn't realize what had happened to his father. Now he does. But that same melancholy persists here. This is hard. Hamlet's a philosopher, and he has a philosopher's mind. And I'm not saying philosophers aren't strong people, but he's a bit more. He's not really a fighter, right? I at least that's my reading of Hamlet. He's a bookworm, and he wants to think big ideas, but when it comes time to put them into practice, this is really hard. And maybe it's easier not to exist than to face this, right? To die, to sleep, to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. This is a desperate kind of Hamlet. And we have to acknowledge at this point Hamlet is contemplating suicide. That's really important. We have to acknowledge that. That's part of it. Now, I'm going to make the case when we get to the fifth video lecture, though, that Hamlet survives these suicidal thoughts. And I think that's a really important part too. Now that's for a later lecture. But in order to get to that point where he survives suicide, we have to acknowledge here he is thinking about ending his own life. But he doesn't. His first reason here for not doing so, to die, to sleep, to sleep, here we go. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep. To sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. So after I die by suicide, what happens next? What dreams come in that sleep of death? And that must give us pause. And remember, back in Act 1, we heard God does not allow suicide. That's not acceptable. This is going to come back up later in the play when we get to Act 5 too. So all this is building. Shakespeare is building these themes right on through Act 1. Here we see it in Act 3. We're going to see it in Acts 4 and 5 too. This theme of suicide, what happens afterward, right? There's the rub, for in that sleep of death, what dreams may come. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time? Who would suffer through life? Why would you ever suffer through all of this? And keep in mind, think of everything Hamlet's going through. His father has been murdered. His uncle sits on the throne, and his mother has married his father's murderer. It's messy. It's horrible. I mean, this is not good stuff. This is right? The oppressor's wrong. The proud man's contumely, who would bear all of this? The pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin. A bodkin's a little dagger, so I could bear it, take it out of its sheath, hold it up. I could take the knife to myself, right? The dagger to myself. Why in this long list of things? And again, on your first time reading this, don't worry if you don't know what every single thing means. Don't, you know, I'll help with things like bare bodkin that are really important, a bare unsheathed knife. But again, there's some tougher stuff in here, and I'm not going to go into super far depth on every single word, and you don't need to either when you read. It's okay to not know some things. I'm going to keep emphasizing that that's okay. Keep going. Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but the dread of something after death? Right? What happens after we die? What does God do after we die if we die by suicide? The undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. Nobody comes back from death to talk to us. Now here's you're probably thinking to yourself, wait a minute, Act 1, the ghost came back, told Hamlet this. Later in Act 3, the ghost is going to come back again. Well, yeah, good point. That's a good observation, and I don't have a super perfect answer for you. There's some complicated answers, but yeah, there's a little bit of a disconnect there for me in that line. Anyway, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied or just means over, hence the contraction, the little apostrophe, is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought. We overthink things, right? Action and thought are kind of two opposites. Hamlet is critiqued as spending too much time thinking, not enough time acting. And that's a conflict that's going to come up in Act 5 again, too. We're going to see Laertes in Act 5. Laertes in Act 5, Act 4 and 5, it's kind of the opposite. He's all action, very little thought. Which one is right? I want to talk about that. Is a, there's an extreme where we overthink things. There's an extreme where we don't think it through at all. Somewhere we need some balance between those two things. And enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. So thought and action. And then in comes Ophelia. And now the situation happens that was set up all the way back to Act 2, that was set up at the beginning of Act 3, Scene 1. Here's the other part you have to answer as a director. We've got Polonius and Claudius hiding on stage right now. They overhear all of this. Or at least we have to decide if we're going to do some sort of... Because lots of directors actually do a little trick where they put this speech somewhere else so that doesn't happen. Because they want this speech to be pure. They want this most famous, important speech just to be between Hamlet and the audience. And I like that. I don't have an issue with moving things around. As long as you keep the words the same. Well, except the one word. As long as you keep the words the same... I like it. I'm good with getting playful with it and doing some different things. And I like the idea of this speech just being between me as an audience member and Hamlet. But if we stick true to the text, it's not. Claudius and Polonius over here, and maybe Ophelia overheard it too. And if Hamlet knows what's going on, and quite frankly, Hamlet tends to know what's going on a lot of the time, then he knows he's being listened to. And that could change the speech. That's a decision that an actor and a director, they need to talk about and figure out, right? Because if he knows he's being spied upon and he's just playing a part, and remember, that's what he's been doing. He's been pretending to be mad all of Act 2. He's been feigning madness. He's put on an antic disposition, are his words. So maybe this could be read as just part of that. I don't know. That's worth thinking about. Lots of different interpretations and ways to do this, and that's the beauty of live theater. You get to try one of those out and see how it fits, how it feels. Anyway, let's move on. Things change though when Ophelia comes on stage, and Ophelia has brought these gifts. It's fun on stage too. You get to pick what are the gifts. Is it a pile of books? Is it some jewelry? Is it love letters? a combination of those things. Anyway, she goes to give them back, and the conversation breaks down. And I want to. This is worth spending time on, but for the sake of time in this video lecture, I'm going to move a little bit more quickly, and I want to focus just on when Hamlet pushes back. Right? He's got kind of this nasty line where he says, "I loved you not," and Ophelia says, "I was the more deceived." He at some point realizes he's being spied upon, and I'm going to just jump down here. Certainly he knows when he says, "Where's your father?" in line 141 right here. He knows he's being spied upon. I don't think he would ask that question just out of the blue. If I'm talking to my girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend, and we're having a deep conversation, I'm not suddenly going to ask, "Where's your dad at?" unless I suspect he's there. So some productions I've seen have Polonius, he's an old, I always think of, I tend to like the reading of Polonius as kind of an old, clumsy guy. I've seen a production recently where he drops his cane suddenly, and Hamlet hears it. He hears something, and he instantly knows what's happening, right? So at least at this point, but I suspect he figured it out sooner. I don't know when. That's up to, and I think that each production needs to decide that for itself. But when he gets to these really sort of nasty, mean lines to Ophelia, I think we have to acknowledge that they are nasty, mean lines. Hamlet is not a perfect human being. He's not a perfect man. There is some toxic masculinity at play, and we especially in this scene. And when he does this speech, "Get thee to a nunnery. Why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? I am myself I am myself indifferent honest, but yet I could accuse me of such things that it were better my mother had not borne me." Hamlet is grossed out, is one way to put it, by his mother's marriage to his uncle, especially given that he knows what his uncle did. And he's projecting that here, I think, onto Ophelia, especially if he realizes now she's spying on him. He essentially is come to the conclusion women are bad. And he's going to say some misogynistic things here and throughout the rest of Act 3, we're going to see. And we need to acknowledge that, and we need to work through that and deal with it. And again, I think we get some kind of a resolution in Act 5, although I don't know if it's satisfying. But that's for the 5th video lecture. We'll get there. He lists then here all the things that are wrong with him. "I am very proud, revengeful, ambitious," I would add misogynistic at this point, "with more offenses at my beck than I have thoughts to put them in, imagination to give them shape, or time to act them in." So I'm a pretty rotten guy. I'm actually one of the best as far as men come, I think. I'm pretty thoughtful and smart and reflective. But even I am proud, revengeful, ambitious. I do more things wrong than I can even think about. I'm always doing something horrible. "What should such fellows as I do crawling between earth and heaven? We are errant knaves all, believe none of us. Go thy ways to a nunnery." So he's critiquing women, but he's also all men. So he's not exactly he's putting some of the blame back on men too, right? On himself. Women are better off in a nunnery. They're better off never getting married, right? And then here's the line, "Where's your father?" that we talked about earlier. And she lies. And he knows she's lying. "At home, my lord." And here's where at some point he kind of loses it. "Let the doors be shut upon him, that he may play the fool nowhere but in his own house. Lock him up. Farewell." We know that he's lost it because of the exclamation point here. "Oh, help him, you sweet heavens!" Right? Yeah, this is hard for her to watch. All right, let's scroll on down. So once they're off stage, we get Polonius and the king conferring over what they've just seen, and he says Claudius, this is a very important plot point to keep in the back of your mind. He needs to move. Remember, he just saw. He knows that there's something very wrong with Hamlet, right? And he makes this plan. "I have in quick determination thus set it down. He shall with speed to England for the demand of our neglected tribute." I need to get him out of here. I need to get Hamlet out of here. And then Polonius says, wait a minute, before you send him to England for this neglected tribute, remember, we're in Denmark. The setting is Denmark. England is across the sea. He's going to go to England, collect this tribute, and come back. Claudius knows he needs to get rid of Hamlet for a little while at least. Polonius says, wait, let's do one more spy mission, right? One more. And remember, there's a play. That's going to be the stuff of Act 3, Scene 2. There's a play. And Polonius says, after the play, let his queen mother all alone entreat him to show his grief. Let her be round with him, and I'll be placed, so please you, in the ear of all their conference. So after the play tonight, set it up so that they go and talk together. I'm going to hide out and listen one more time. So we spied on him and Ophelia, his girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, depending on kind of where we think that's at right now. And now let's spy on a conversation between him and Gertrude, between Hamlet and his mother. If she find him not, to England send him, or confine him where your wisdom best shall think. And the king says, it shall be so. Madness in great ones must not unwatched go. Right? Okay. All right. So we jump to Scene 2. And this is the play within a play. The mousetrap scene. So the earlier scene we can call the nunnery scene. Gets referred to as Act 3, Scene 1 gets referred to as the nunnery scene. Act 3, Scene 2 is the mousetrap scene. And as we'll see, Hamlet is going to say that the play is the mousetrap. That's the play that he's going to put on for his uncle to see. Now, one important point here, too. Notice that much of the play thus far has been in verse. And you can see verse visually with these capital letters, the truncated lines. Most of these lines are 10 syllables. They're mostly iambic pentameter. There's some play in that. There's some rhyme, but not much. It doesn't need to rhyme to be verse. We often do see rhymes at the end of a scene, though, like so and go. And that gives a auditory cue to the folks, the next set of actors to come on. So Hamlet's listening us off stage. The actor playing Hamlet's listening off stage, trying to figure out when it's his turn to come on stage. He's listening. It's a little easier to hear that rhyme. So sometimes you see rhyme at the end. But anyway, my point here is look at this. This is prose. And you can see visually, I'm going to read this line in a moment. You can see visually, even before you start reading, though, that this looks different. Right? And it's going to sound a little different too. We've switched from verse to prose. And the reason Shakespeare switches from verse to prose is because whereas here we had a conversation between nobility, the king, and his right-hand man Polonius, here we've got a speech. This is Hamlet and 3 of the players, the actors. Actors are not high-born. They're not nobility. They're not royalty. They're just regular, everyday people. They were not as famous as today's actors would be. Even if they were famous, that doesn't make them nobility. So Shakespeare marks everyday speech, everyday people, a lot of times with prose. And even though Hamlet's a prince, since he's talking to everyday people, he's going to switch to prose here. So pay attention when you see Shakespeare shift from verse to prose. Anyway, so he's talking to the actors and he's got some advice. And the advice is wonderful. Lots of theatricality in the play. And here he's saying, here's the best way to act. He says, speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it, as many of our players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines. So I had as lief means I would as much hope the town crier, the person who stands up and yells the news out to the whole town and they come and listen. Not much art to it, not much skill. No, if you're going to say my lines, remember he had a dozen or 16 lines to the play. So they are, part of them are his lines, but no matter what, he's asked for the play to be performed. So these are his lines. Anyway, pronounce your words clearly. Enunciate. Right? Don't just blah, 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 blah. Don't stutter. Don't blur your words together. Enunciate them clearly. And he's going to give some more advice too. Do not saw the air too much with your hands, right? A little bit's okay, but don't do it over the top. Now I'm conscious of my own hand gestures just a little bit, right? I need to not saw the air as I do my little video lecture here. Anyway, so he gives this advice to the players, and we move on. Lots of good stuff there, but we're moving on. Trying to keep this around 35 minutes or so, and I see my time is I need to hurry a little bit. The king asks or I'm sorry, Horatio. He's talking to Horatio. Horatio and Hamlet are talking, and he gives Hamlet gives the plot. Tonight, before the king, one scene of it, the play, comes near the circumstance which I have told thee of my father's death. I prithee, when thou seest that act afoot, even with the very comment of thy soul, observe my uncle, right? Watch him. See what he does when he sees that scene, right? And then, for mine eyes will rivet to his face, and after we will both our judgments join in censure of his seeming. So we're going to watch him. We're going to see how he responds, right? And with our judgments, both our judgments, we'll join them together, and we'll do a little judging, censure of what he seems to have revealed, right? All right, so they're going to do this. Now let's get on to the play within a play. There's a beautiful little bit here. So I've got to point this one out because I really love this one. Hamlet says to Polonius, so everyone's on stage at this point. The whole court's there. Everyone's listening. Laertes isn't back yet. He's one person who's not there. But Ophelia is, Polonius is. Almost all the major characters are on for this scene. And Hamlet is going to use his witty wordplay to outsmart poor Polonius again. My lord, you played once in the university, you say. So you used to be an actor, right, Polonius? Polonius says, yeah, that did I, my lord, and was accounted a good actor. What did you enact? I did enact Julius Caesar. I was killed in the Capitol. Brutus killed me. So if you know, the Julius Caesar was assassinated by several senators, including Brutus, who he thought of as a son. And they had done this play together, right? And Hamlet, of course, has this funny, it was a brute part of him to kill, so capital, a calf there, so playing on Brutus and brute, capital and capital. Anyway, here's it's a beautiful witty wordplay where Hamlet once again makes fun of Polonius, right? But what's really fun too for the audience, about a year before Hamlet, Shakespeare had written Julius Caesar. This was all played out, and in Act 3 of that play, Brutus stabs Caesar. And a lot of scholars probably think this is kind of an inside joke for the audience who would have seen that production a year before, because it's probably the same actor. Richard Burbage probably was the first man to play Hamlet, and he also would have played a year before he would have played Brutus, the main character in the Julius Caesar play, and probably the same actor. So it's kind of funny because it's pointing out, that there's an inside little joke, because we just saw this guy stab this guy a year ago, but in the different play, and now they're kind of mentioning that. Anyway, very fun meta-theatrical commentary on theater itself. So Hamlet's got some dirty lines in the play. I won't go through all of them, but we see them here, right? He walks up to Ophelia, says, Lady, shall I lie in your lap? No, my lord. I mean my head upon your lap. Aye, my lord. Do you think I meant country matters? So, country matters has been interpreted by many scholars to have a double meaning, a double entendre here. And that word, country matters, still sounds like a rather vulgar 21st century word that you might still know. And a lot of scholars think it did then too, although there's some disagreement there. That's a whole other conversation. But a lot of times this gets interpreted as him making dirty jokes. Another one then, Ophelia doesn't want anything to do with his dirty jokes, his lewd jokes. I think nothing, my lord. That's a fair thought to lie between maids' legs. What is, my lord? Nothing. So I'll explain one dirty joke, and then I'm going to kind of stop, because I don't want to explain every dirty joke in Hamlet. So in our time and in Shakespeare's time, the word thing can refer to male genitalia. You may have heard it used that way, in a kind of a vulgar, lewd way. It did in Shakespeare's time too. But in Shakespeare's time, the word no thing could be a reference to female genitalia in kind of a rude, lewd, vulgar sort of way. So that's a fair thought to lie between a maid's legs. What is, and then a vulgar way of saying female genitalia lies between a maid's legs. So all right, enough. There's more, and you can I'll let you keep going with that on your own, but I'm gonna stop there before I blush too much more, right? I'm gonna hurry right along. Oh, I do want to point out just one thing to notice here. we know that Shakespeare's words have changed pronunciation from his time to our time. Some of them have. Most of them have not, but some have. And one of the ways we can look at that is we can look at rhyming couplets. So everything here is supposed to be rhyming. Late, state, distrust, must. And we can go up here to round, ground. We can very easily see the rhyming couplets. But sometimes there's one that doesn't. Sometimes there's a couplet that doesn't rhyme, like moon and done. And that's a clue. Linguists use that to know that Shakespeare's words, the pronunciation of his words, have shifted just a little bit, the way we speak. So this was probably moon and dune at one point. So many journeys may the sun and moon make us again count or ere love be dune. Something like that, or maybe something a little bit in between moon and anyway, all right, moving on. There's lots of those clues, and I point that out because here's another one: move and louvre, mauve, love. They need to rhyme in Shakespeare's time. We don't need to make them rhyme in the 21st century. We can just overlook it. But in Shakespeare's time, and linguists use that in some pretty cool ways. Here we get a pretty famous line. There's a pause, and the player queen comes on. Madam, how like you this play? The lady doth protest too much, methinks. Love that line. But she'll keep her word. Have you heard the argument? Is there no offense in it? No, they do but jest. Poison in jest. No, it's just a silly little play about poisoning the king. It's a comedy. It's funny. And of course, Hamlet's being very, very tongue-in-cheek here. And also that lovely wordplay. You poison in jest, like poison as a joke, but also you poison in jest as in you, like the way you'd ingest food, too. No offense in the world. The king then kind of steps in. What do you call the play? And here's where we get his name for it, the mousetrap, and hence why this is called the mousetrap scene. And it's very important. He goes on to talk about the play, the mousetrap, a little bit to the king. And at the end he says, this is one Lucianus, nephew to the king. And this is important. So in The Murder of Gonzago, the play that's being played out in front of the king right now, it's not his brother who murders the king, the way it actually happened in Hamlet's real story for Hamlet's dad. No. The nephew is going to murder the king. So not only is Hamlet revealing to Claudius, I know what you did to my dad through the play, but only you know that I know. He is also threatening and saying kings can be murdered by their nephews. Look. And that, as I think that those two things together, Claudius loses it. And so we get to the end of the play. When he sees that play out, when he sees what the nephew does, pours poison into the ear of the king. Yeah. And Horatio and Hamlet see it. Great another moment too. Oh Damon dear, this is just Hamlet and Horatio afterward. They've seen the king lose it. They know he's guilty. They both saw it. And anyway, Hamlet kind of has this little quote. Oh Damon dear, this realm dismantled was of Jove himself, and now reigns here a very, very Pajac. And there's a pause that the dash tells us. This is kind of a fun line, but you have to kind of understand what's happening here. And on stage, maybe you skip it. But you should know. Was would be the pronunciation in Shakespeare's time. Was. And the rhyme, so dear, here, these are supposed to rhyme, but Shakespeare, Hamlet, decides not to rhyme, and he changes what should be very clearly the word ass should be here. It should be, O Damon dear, this realm dismantled was of Jove himself, and now reigns here a very, very ass. Who reigns here? Who's the ass who reigns here? Claudius, right? And Horatio says, you might have rhymed, but he doesn't. Instead, he puts, instead of ass, turns it into a peacock. And a peacock was a very, not necessarily, it was a bird that was seen as very lusty, very sexual kind of a symbolism in Shakespeare's time. Anyway, the point that comes here, oh good Horatio, I'll take the ghost's word for 1,000 pound. Didst perceive. Very well, my lord. Did you see the way that the king reacted? I did, my lord. Upon the talk of poisoning, I did very well note him. They know he's guilty. Let's jump down. I want to get to, very quickly, Act 3, Scene 3. Pass all of this. Act 3, Scene 3. We've got the king talking with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern a bit. I'm going to skip right over that for now. And here we see the king, once he's alone on stage. Polonius was there earlier. He exits. He's alone on stage. He prays. And he says, oh, my offense is rank. It smells to heaven. It has the primal eldest curse upon it, a brother's murder. Pray can I not, right? So he's down on his knees praying. He just saw the play. It moved him. Plays move people. Hamlet and Horatio saw him moved by the action of the play, the guilt, the shame that Claudius feels here. And he's on his knees trying, but failing to pray. Pray can I not. And if you had any doubt whether or not Claudius really murdered his brother, if you had any doubt as an audience member, now you know. This is a confession. The king confesses to having murdered his brother to become king. And all of a sudden Hamlet comes in. He sees this. He says, now might I do it, Pat. Now he is a praying, and now he'll do it. He draws his sword. So we've got the king praying, and actually, let me show you. I've got an illustration of this one. Let me pull this up. Here we are. Kind of get that into the frame. Yeah, and here's a book illustration, and you can see him walking behind. I love the eyes. The Claudius is just, his hands are folded. He's trying to pray. When you pray, you're supposed to close your eyes, though, and he can't. So that's very telling. All right. But here's the important part. Hamlet doesn't kill him here. He has his chance, but he doesn't. And here's why. Because he goes to heaven, and so am I revenged. But that would be scanned. A villain kills my father, and for that I, his sole son, do the same villain send to heaven? Now, this is higher in salary, not revenge. Yeah, so he decides, I'm not going to send him to heaven. I want to send him to hell instead, or purgatory, or a place of punishment, not a place. If you kill him while he's praying, cleansing his soul, that won't do. Some scholars point to this as just one of the nastiest bits that Hamlet does in all of Shakespeare, wanting not just to get his revenge, but to send a soul to hell, is even harsher, right? Especially someone who wants to be forgiven. But here's the twist at the end. Remember, Claudius said he couldn't pray, and he reaffirms that at the very end of the scene. My words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go. He couldn't pray. He couldn't bring himself to pray. And so therefore he wasn't actually praying, and Hamlet could have sent his soul to hell, but didn't. Lots to process there. Last scene, Act 3, Scene 4. This is the closet scene, and we get Hamlet in the closet. For our purposes, think of it as a bedroom. It's more of a dressing room. But anyway, it's Gertrude's one of her private chambers, and we got Polonius hiding, and Hamlet realizes again he's being spied upon, but this time, when he hears Polonius make a sound, he stabs him. And listen to the queen, Gertrude. Oh, what a rash and bloody deed is this. He kills Polonius behind the curtain. Scroll down. Watching the clock. I'm over my time, so I'm going to try to wrap up quickly here. Hamlet has quite a bit here. There's a lot that I'm going to kind of just go over relatively quickly. He says to her, what should I do? Hamlet says to her, do not do this. To live in the rank sweat of an enseamed bed, stewed in corruption, honeying and making love over the nasty sty. Awkward. He's telling his mom, don't have sex with your husband. Yeah. And it strikes her, right? She says, oh, speak to me no more. These words like daggers enter into my ears. No more, sweet Hamlet. And Hamlet gets so agitated here, the ghost reappears. And the ghost reminds Hamlet what you're supposed to do. And the ghost in Act 1 had said, leave your mother to heaven. You are not to kill her, not to hurt her, leave her be. And the ghost reminds him, do not forget, this visitation is but to whet thy almost blunted purpose. My visitation to come see you right now, Hamlet. But look, amazement on thy mother sits. O step between her and her fighting soul. Conceit in weakest body's strongest works. Speak to her, Hamlet. And he does, and this line often gets a chuckle in performance. How is it with you, lady? Alas, how is it with you that you do bend your eye on vacancy? She doesn't see the ghosts the way the way Horatio and Marcellus and could in Act 1. That doesn't happen here. She doesn't see the ghost. He remains invisible to her. On him, Hamlet's pointing to the ghost. Look you, how pale he glares. She says, to whom do you speak this? Do you see nothing there? Nothing at all, yet all that is I see. Right? Yeah. She doesn't, she can't see the ghost. I'm going very, very quickly. And I want one more point I want to make. Hamlet, as he's leaving and he drags the body of Polonius off stage, and once again she says, what would you have me do? What shall I do? And Hamlet says, not this by no means. And he says, don't go to bed again, kind of repeating that. But don't let the king make you, this last line, make you to ravel all this matter out. And this is the part I actually want to get to, that I am essentially not in madness, but mad in craft. I've only been pretending to be mad these last 2 months. Don't tell the king that. And so that gives us a really nice embedded stage direction here. Hamlet's not, Horatio knows his secret. That's it. Now his mom does too, and she's the only other one. All right, I'm way over time. I'm going to stop there. I meant to keep this around 35 minutes, and I'm up to 41. So I stop there. Next video lecture, we will move to Act 4. All right, thanks, everybody. Looking forward to talking about Act 4 with you.